I think it's kind of amazing that it has finally seeped into consumer electronics.
If it prevents people from getting their hands on GTA 6, cars are going to get flipped over on the street. You would think yourself big enough to sign a direct deal with the memory makers and think to yourself, yeah, I think I'm big enough to do that. Welcome to Supply Chained. I'm John from Asianometry.
I'm Tim Culpin from Culpium. John, a lot of drama again happening with chipflation over at Apple. I want to talk about that today. It's kind of the topic of the month. Tim Cook blames
Weak,
Micron.
really.
Yeah. Well, Tim Cook came out and raised prices. He signaled it, he flagged it, he blamed the memory guys, and the memory guys replied and said, "No, it's not us, it's you." And so there's this pointing at everybody about who's to blame for raising prices. And frankly, there's a lot of blame to go around. I think it's kind of amazing that it has finally seeped into consumer electronics. Meanwhile, a lawsuit is underway in the US with
Is it really kind of like a big deal, though? Or is it just a publicity stunt?
I think that's a fantastic question. A big deal for whom? It's a big deal for Apple customers who now have to pay between $100 and $500 more for their already overpriced gadgets. It's a big deal in a good way for all the DRAM guys who are making bank and really raking in the cash. And it's not a good deal for the gamers who have kind of been screwed over by this because their GPUs and their high DRAM expensive laptops and desktops are really expensive. And there's a lawsuit, as I said, about this. So I think it's a big deal. How long it'll be a big deal is also another question.
I mean, if it prevents people from getting their hands on GTA 6, I think it's, cars are going to get flipped over on the street. It's going to be terrible.
Oh, look, if it's stopping anyone getting GTA 6, then definitely that's, Congress must investigate. But I mean, you've looked at a lot of the DRAM guys. I have as well, and we actually did a podcast a few weeks ago about DRAM. But I think what's interesting is it's kind of become the boogeyman. It's gone from 12 months ago to HBM is hip, and no one really knew what HBM was, to now DRAM is the boogeyman, and DRAM players are all like sharks. I think it'll play out along those lines in future. People will keep hating on the DRAM guys because they are really making so much money. And Tim Cook is probably very happy to point the finger at them for as long as he can, or at least the next 2 months while he's still in office, and see what John Turnus does afterwards. But I do also note that Apple is not the only ones getting screwed by high DRAM prices. Lenovo, HP, Dell also getting screwed, but you don't hear Mike Dell coming out and complaining about it. You don't hear Lenovo complaining about it. It's really only Tim Cook who's kind of bitching about it right now. So I think that says a lot.
I think the mobile guys are also getting screwed. You know who's really
big
happy
time.
about this? Probably TSMC. Like,
Yeah.
No one's really complaining. No one's really saying that TSMC is cock blocking the AI boom now. Can I say that online?
Right.
I guess I can.
Well, a cock is a male rooster, so yeah. No, that is true. Of course, all the people a year ago who were complaining that TSMC weren't expanding fast enough, mutual friends of yours and mine, don't seem to be saying the same thing about DRAM, which I find very interesting. But yes, TSMC is probably very happy on a multiple levels, because if you are going to make and sell a cell phone, you know that you're not going to get the volume sold, right? You're not going to sell the low-level ones because the DRAM price is getting so high that you're really only going to sell the more expensive ones that people are already paying a high price for. So on a unit basis, it's not good for TSMC, but possibly on the basis of like more expensive technology, like having better like N3, N2 chips going into smartphones, that's not so bad for TSMC. It's not like TSMC is struggling to fill its fabs anyway. So there's not a lot of downside for TSMC. MediaTek really struggled, but they're pivoting to AI chips now. So there's definitely a theory that MediaTek is the next chip company to really go on a tear.
Do you is it true? Have you heard it's like AI supply companies, like AI, like it's like 50-60% of the BOM is like memory now? Is that I don't know. I've not heard
Of
I've not
AI
heard backing
companies?
for that. Or
No,
AI
I think
like their chip systems or whatever.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the actual chip, you've got the HBM chip that, the HBM that goes onto the packaging. I think it's still mostly, yeah, I think Nvidia is still getting most of that money. So no, but I do know, for example, that I just published this recently in Colpium, that memory and NAND together has gone from low mid-single digit percent of the BOM cost of an iPhone to 35% of the BOM cost of an iPhone. So from $20, $30 to $130, $140 within the space of a year. And that's where Tim Cook's coming from when he says, well, we tried to mitigate it, but we're passing on the costs to others, and Apple did go around and try and squeeze all of its suppliers to like, hey, we need to save pennies here and pounds there. But in terms of the AI systems, I think it's still mostly, I think Jensen's getting most of that money still.
I had a few friends. I had a few friends talk to me, or they were in town last couple of days, and the first thing they asked was like, "John, why can't TSMC make DRAM?" And then a friend of mine as well, a couple hours ago, texted me and was just like, "Hey," knows absolutely nothing about chips. I was just like, "Why doesn't TSMC make DRAM?"
Would you like to go ahead and answer that question for everybody, John?
Maybe I'll make a video out of it. Like if I can
Well, I
stretch
mean,
that content to 20 minutes, I think it'd be great.
that is, I'd like to hear that video. The other video I'm hoping is when you explain one X, one Y, one Z, one alpha, one beta, one gamma, which is the various DRAM nodes.
Oh, that one's easy.
That's fascinating. Oh, great. Yeah, I look forward to that video then. But I mean, the TLDR on why doesn't TSMC make DRAM is A, it's highly cyclical. Why would you bother? B, you need a specific fab setup for it. Like you don't just like whip up a DRAM recipe. And C, it's actually one capacitor paired with one transistor. So it's a very specific process. And it's just like even Samsung, which makes both, doesn't do them in the same fab. You have a dedicated DRAM fab, a dedicated logic fab, and a dedicated NAND fab. So they are quite different processes.
They're fundamentally different. Yeah.
They are.
The
Yeah,
presence of the capacitor itself makes it extremely difficult to, for whatever reason, but just fundamentally different. I mean, if you just look at them, right?
Hmm.
It's like a big vertical sausage.
Yeah.
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 Sausage.
I think the ratio I think is 100 to 1. So 100 units high to 1 unit wide.
Absolutely nuts. Like it's. I think the capacitor might even be visible, like to human eyes. Probably not, but like
under a microscope, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, under like a regular microscope. Which, if you think about semiconductors, like leading edge semiconductors, that's wild, right? Something you can actually see with your bare eyes.
Yeah.
That's nuts. So, it makes perfect sense to me that TSMC is like it's not easy.
They do make RAM though. They made SRAM.
SRAM.
They make very slick.
MRAM, STT
yes,
MRAM.
but that goes directly onto the die, so it's not a separate thing. So, yes, TSMC is in the memory business, in the RAM business. It's one of the products in their spice rack. Yes.
Can you think Apple would be like, "Hey, let's just do a wafer full of SRAM and just roll that out, MRAM, STT MRAM." They're so desperate that they're going to do a hot lot of MRAM.
And see how they package it, and like you just work it out. Because I mean, one thing to remember is Apple doesn't use CoWoS, right? So they certainly don't yet. Maybe they will in future. I don't think they would in future, but they don't use CoWoS, so they're not caught up in the whole lack of CoWoS capacity like everybody else. But they would have to find a way to package or put the MRAM together. And I look forward to the emails from listeners explaining why I'm wrong on this, because it's really at the periphery of my knowledge of how you would make it a full die of MRAM or SRAM. But back to Apple, it is interesting that Tim Cook kind of complains about the DRAM guys, and he's not entirely wrong, to be fair. But at the same time, he could have done more early on in the process to pay for capacity and do dedicated capacity. And they have in recent years, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, they have put down cash to help build out Micron's New York fab, which is coming up. But some of that capacity will be HBM, which has got nothing to do with Apple. So Apple's not paying for the whole thing, but they are going ahead and putting cash up front to help pay for Micron's rollout. But the other thing is that Micron is crying crocodile tears saying, because of some customers who kind of screwed us really hard during the last downturn, we didn't have the money to expand now. And I just call BS on that, because Apple just isn't a large enough component of the global DRAM market. Because compared to the amount of DRAM that goes into a laptop, there's not that much in a smartphone. And Apple is like, market share of laptops is very low. Also, Apple's market share by unit shipments of smartphones globally is only around 20%. Now, they get most of the money, but the actual unit shipments only about 20%. And admittedly, their high end or even their low end smartphones will often have a bit more DRAM than a low end, say a Xiaomi. But overall, on a net basis, by my calculations, Apple is maybe only number 4, number 5 DRAM buyer globally at best, which means they're not a big player. And so Micron complaining that Apple is screwing them down on price and not letting them make any money so they can't afford to invest just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to blame like your 4th or 5th largest client for you not having enough money to invest, when Lenovo, HP, Dell are surely much bigger buyers of DRAM, as well as the cloud service providers who are
Did
also big
they
buyers
really
of DRAM.
call out Apple specifically though, or was that just kind of like a maybe it's like a blind item kind of thing?
No, it was the way it came out was it was in a Wall Street Journal interview where, so Rolf Winkler's been all over this story. He seems to have a very tight relationship with Apple, which is not a diss. It's good to have a strong tight relationship with a company you cover. They, for example, Apple took him out to TSMC Foxconn Global Wafers back in February for a tour of what Apple's doing in America. And then Tim Cook gave him the interview in
Mm,
mid-June or late June
right,
saying we're going to have to raise prices, right?
right.
And then they did raise prices. And then Rolf Winkler and his colleagues at Wall Street Journal managed to somehow get some time with the chief business officer, I think it is, and ask the question, you're talking about Apple here. And they didn't name Apple directly, but it was like the implication was it was Apple. But
Right,
they
right.
did also say a couple of customers during the last downturn.
Yeah, the 23 downturn, right?
Right, the 23 downturn. So a lot of people take it as being Apple, but they didn't say it as Apple.
Yeah.
So there's some
I think
plausible
I think
deniability on
yeah,
Micron's side.
right. It's kind of tough for them. I can sense I'm like I mean I'm not going to defend a $1 trillion company right now, but like my only point is that like these like DRAM people truly are like the most screwed of the screwed. Like they have absolute trauma,
Yeah,
and
but it's
chicken
also
game
part of the
stuff is. Hmm?
part of the problem. I agree with you. I look, I don't shed tears for either side on this, but it is a very cyclical business. But there has been attempts at long-term supply agreements, LTAs, right?
Yeah,
And they've always
yeah,
been gentleman agreements in a business where there's no gentleman,
yeah.
right? These companies have been called in for price fixing, antitrust, like every few years.
Mm-hmm.
Like just go into Google and Google Micron antitrust, and you get like 2000 and something, 2006, 2000, whatever. And it's just like so many different periods of time when they're getting hauled over the coals for antitrust and settling and paying fines. But then there's also these long-term supply agreements where they agree usually on volume, and they don't necessarily agree on price, but they agree on like
Like a
something
band of some
related.
sort.
It's usually, well, no, that's the new agreement with Micron, the strategic
Mm-hmm.
customer agreements, which is a new approach. And I congratulate them on bringing in the new approach. But the old one was like, we guaranteed to buy or provide a certain amount of volume. I think it's on a quarterly basis, but I'm not sure, at a price that is somehow connected to whatever the market spot price is at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But quite often what happens is when the price goes up and then the DRAM sellers want to renege because the price has gone up and they don't want to be locked into a lower price. And when the price goes down, the buyers want to renege because they want to get the lower price. And so the deals almost never hold. They just fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Micron's done is done something differently, which is what they call a strategic customer agreement, which I always confuse as supply chain agreement, a strategic customer agreement. And they outlined this in their recent earnings call, where it's a price band with, I think it's a take or pay deal, where you either take the deal that you've signed or you pay your way out of it. or lose money,
Mm.
and there's cash up front. They say they've signed 16 of these deals. Well, there's not 16 laptop makers or smartphone makers in the world, right? And I actually asked around, a lot of people tell me about these deals, and people kept saying, oh, no, it's the cloud service providers, it's the CSPs that have signed the deals. I'm like, what? Now, they did
Yeah.
say in their announcement that it was auto companies, consumer electronics, and cloud providers.
Hmm.
But that's really interesting because cloud providers aren't direct customers of DRAM. Like,
Yeah,
the
but
cloud
I
providers buy from Foxconn, Wistron, Flextronics, or Flex, those guys. And it's
hmm
usually traditionally been those guys who do the deals, who go out and
yeah.
buy the DRAM. But
But
this
didn't you
kind of
say earlier that Foxconn is now doing something like a consignment model
exactly.
where
So there's been a real change in the model where Foxconn and others, we win, which is a spin-off of Wistron, which is a major provider of AI servers, and now happily handing that back to the clients and saying, you know what, you deal with it. You go and find the supply and work out the deal and just ship us the chips. And it's not going to go through our books at all. And we
mm,
don't have to deal with it. And
hmm
in some ways, that's good because there's no financial burden, cash flow burden on Foxconn, Wistron, whatever. But on the other side, it also somewhat weakens their bargaining power because if you're a Foxconn and you've got, say, Meta and Google and Oracle and half a dozen hyperscalers, you can go to a Hynix, a Samsung, or a Micron and say, dude, you've got to give me a better price because I'm literally bringing the top 5 buyers, get me the best price. But in this kind of climbing market, the CSPs are kind of on their own and they're all got to go out and negotiate their own deals directly.
yeah,
And maybe that's good, maybe
yeah.
that's bad. I can see the benefit either way. But I just
I
thought it
would
was very
reckon,
interesting that Micron
right.
signed those deals directly with the CSPs. That was a bit unusual. I'm surprised by that.
I would reckon if you are an AI company or an AI lab and you're producing what you perceive to be trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure, you would think yourself big enough to sign a direct deal with the memory makers and think to yourself, yeah, I think I'm big enough to do that. Yeah, I could do that.
That's why I think Micron's smart here, because they've got these bands and they're in a position of strength. And from what I know, the bands are quite relatively high, historically high levels of price. And Micron locks them in. And then 5 years later, when the market collapses, it's a take or pay deal. So, all right, you don't want the HBM anymore? You don't want the DDR? Not a problem. You're just going to have to pay your way out, or we're just going to take the deposit and keep it for ourselves.
Tim, are you doubting the AI revolution, Tim
I'm not.
Copeland?
I am not doubting the AI revolution. AI is real. I am doubting the business model behind it and the capex that's going into it. That's not a problem. It's the whole, are we in an AI bubble? Yes, we are, but that's not a bad thing. I'm not anti-bubble. I think bubbles can play a very positive role, except for the investors who get screwed and all the people who lose their jobs when the bubble bursts. But
And the
overall,
people who lose their retirement funds and all the people who own the stock and just lose buttloads of money and all
yeah,
that.
yeah, and I mean it really causes pain. I've watched bubbles. I lived through the dot-com bubble, and then there was the housing price bubble, crisis bubble of 2009, which I got nothing to do with US real estate, and I was impacted by that. Bubbles happen, but in some cases, the internet bubble left behind the rubble of the internet bubble left behind a very robust infrastructure for the internet on which the world was built over the subsequent 20-25 years. And
Ah,
I think
that
that'll happen with
canard.
AI.
I'm the more I hear about it. That's a side. This is a side thing. Maybe I'll do a video about it later. But the more I hear about that, the more I think that's not true at all. Like the
Oh,
bubble was terrible.
I
The
look
fiber
forward.
bubble destroyed optical fiber research for 20 years. It was ridiculous.
I thought that was IP theft from China that destroyed that research, but
They went it went willingly. No one was paying for that.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the point. And like probably when the AI bubble bursts, the hardware side will be set back because I'm like, we've got to hunker down, save our money, and we will get to this point of whatever the next area of research is in AI compute hardware. We'll go into some kind of winter for a few years. Winter is coming. We all know winter is coming. It's a matter of when and where, and what's the point on worrying about it now when we're all partying like it's 1999?
Yeah. There's one last thing I want to say before we close things. And I was recently in Korea.
Mm.
I was eating kimchi and buying
Drinking shochu.
cosmetics.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Do you know Olive Young is now everywhere in South Korea? It doesn't make
Oh,
sense. Like a couple years ago, when I first came, it was just one of those places. Now it's everywhere. It's ridiculous. It's
wow.
like
And you were there,
7-Eleven. It's South
you
Korea's 7-Eleven.
you went there for plastic surgery, or?
Yeah, I was getting my face done. I needed to look more deer-like, so I was trying to get
Mm,
it all worked.
mm,
But I think the thing that really struck out with me is that there's going to be a cultural shift coming, and I think within these companies and how Hynix, Samsung, I think has always been kind of really well known. I think Samsung is kind of like this big evil. People like to hate on Samsung, and I think
yeah.
Hynix has always been kind of in the secondary, kind of in the
The
shadow.
underdog. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's now this company is starting to really step out into the global world, and I think like that's going to be a big change for them. And like,
Mm.
but in Korea, I think what's really stunned me is just like how much people talk, like how obviously it's known that Samsung and Hynix, they're kind of like the top companies in all of South Korea in technology. Naver and I think Kakao are the other ones.
Mm.
But like, yeah, it's really fascinating to me. It's going to be an interesting transition, and I think it reminds me a lot of when TSMC started to become a lot more well known. I think
Mm.
in 2019, 2020. In TSMC's case, I think, eventually they kind of muddled their way through it. I don't think
They
they
weren't
still
ready
kind
for
of,
it. They were not
they
ready
weren't
for
ready
it.
for,
They were
not ready for it at all.
unwillingly global company. Yeah, they didn't want to be a global company.
Yeah, they're dragged out. And I think
Mm.
there are a lot of misconceptions that came out around those companies as well about TSMC. Like, things that are just absolutely ridiculously make no sense are being repeated online, like with
Mm.
100% assurance. And I think that's going to happen soon with this memory shortage. The memory shortage is going to do the same thing, and I think there's going to be all sorts of stuff spewed out about these memory companies. Samsung, I think they're fine with it, but I do wonder what's going to happen with Hynix in the years ahead.
I think
It's going to be
that's.
interesting.
Yeah, I think you and I, both at Asianometry, Colpium, as well as supply chain, will probably have to keep an eye on that because, yeah, I think you're right. SK Hynix will step into the spotlight willingly or unwillingly, and we'll have to deal with it. And I think the US is definitely an area where that's going to be an issue. Aren't they doing a GDR in that they're actually going to list shares in the US? I think they've
That's
just
going to be
filed for
even
the,
bigger.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's going to definitely put them, at some point, they're going to be on the radar of the White House. They're going to have to be. And I won't be surprised if, whether it's Commerce or the White House directly, starts saying, hey, SK Hynix, you need to do more in America. Because they do have something in America with back end packaging and testing. It's not front end fabrication. And I wouldn't be surprised if the US starts putting pressure on them, like they did with TSMC, to say, make this in America. Thank you very much.
If they're smart, they'll say that the packaging is the smart stuff. It's
Yeah,
already there.
yeah. And if idiots are idiots, they will go, okay, sure, we believe you. All right. This has been another episode of Supply Chain. I'm Tim Colpin from Colpium.
And I'm John from Asianometry.
Thanks for joining us.